I have spent the past day playing Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, and as a result of that, I have a better understanding of the game and its problems than anybody on Twitter. Learning the Law, Mr. Medicare, Side Scrollers, RGT85, the Daka Daka guy, all of these individuals are complete and total dipshits. They have no idea what they're talking about. And as a result of that, I really do need to come out and say that yes, everything you have heard about Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is a complete and total lie. Miles is not annoying. The game is not woke. You are not, it is not some millennial, like, girl boss power fantasy. It's not some, like, complete subversion of the Metroid formula. Like, it's not some complete disaster, essentially. Like, every single thing that I have seen about the game, other than maybe the bike and the desert being kind of like underwhelming, everything I have heard is just completely and totally wrong. Anybody who says that this game is a disaster, like, simply hasn't played it. And that's very obvious if you, like, look at what these people are talking about and, like, their narratives. Like, oh man, you need an amiibo to unlock music in the desert. Like, it's a music player that you unlock upon 100% completion. You unlock it early by using the amiibo. It's no different than what Donkey Kong Bonanza did with its amiibo. Like, again, it's not even like a new thing. It's not some major controversy. It's not some major feature being locked behind these figurines. It's just a method to unlock a feature before 100% completion, essentially. Like, there's nothing iffy about it. There's nothing weird. It was a complete and total cope to try and make this out to be some, like, anti-consumer thing. Okay, and there's just so many examples of that. Like, I'm seeing so many people, like, freaking out about this game in regards to the review scores, in regards to, like, the structure, the general gameplay, and, like, having played about, like, 7 to 8 hours, I'm probably like 2/3 of the way in. Uh, it's a perfectly fine game. Like, I would say it probably is not on the level of Metroid Prime 1 and 3, but what you have to understand, especially when it comes to Metroid Prime 1, like, that was one of the most critically acclaimed games ever made. The simple fact of the matter is, it is, like, unreasonable to assume that Metroid Prime 4 was going to be, like, on par with one of the most critically acclaimed games ever released. Like, it just isn't that reasonable. It just doesn't happen all that often. It and considering just, this game's development cycle and, like, everything it went through, like restarting development, like, a lot of the original team leaving, like, honestly, I'm kind of shocked that Metroid Prime 4 is as good as it is. Like, that's just kind of my perspective on it, looking at this, because, like, playing this, there were definitely kind of things that, like, I felt like didn't really make a whole lot of sense. Like, why do you have to go back to Miles to get certain equipment upgrades installed? Like, why is the desert structured the way it is? Um like, why is the beginning of the game so weirdly paced? Like, there are things you can, like, point to, like, say that, like, don't really make any sense and aren't all that well put together. But, like, as a whole, like, the sum of its parts, it's really, really good. Like, the desert is empty. That's true. There's nothing in the desert. That's true. But it's basically just a means to get to your destination. Like, when you actually get to the actual areas, they are very well fleshed out. They all have unique enemy designs, completely unique layouts, like, completely unique gimmicks. They all have, like, great boss fights. Like, when it comes to an actual level design perspective, I would say this is the best Metroid Prime game. Like, you can argue that, like, maybe Metroid Prime 2 is more difficult and that Metroid Prime 3 had better, like, combat encounters. But when you look at Metroid Prime 4 and what it does, like, it has this really interesting setup of you, like, going to this area and, like, going to these areas and, like, trying to figure out how to proceed in them. And sometimes it's just not possible. This game is, I think, the most non-linear Metroid Prime game ever, because, in the older games, you had to, like, um, progress through areas in a linear fashion. you had to like stay there until you like found some whatever you needed, and you then had to like kind of move on to the next area. Metroid Prime One is really interesting because uh, you have a hint system that tells you exactly where you need to go, and it's pretty easy. Like you're kind of railroaded from place to place until you get to the end and you have to chase down the Chozo artifacts that are hidden all over the map. Like Metroid Prime 4, in comparison, feels a lot more open-ended. It feels a lot more like every room you go in, you kind of have to like figure out how to navigate it. You have to apply the mechanics in interesting ways. You have like all these like tools at your disposal. Like every area like is completely different. Like there's just so much like to see and do in each area. It's very easy to just kind of overlook certain things. Like I remember when I went to Vault Forge and I was looking around and I kind of realized that like there's a lot of places, a lot of things that you can clearly interact with, but you can't use yet. Like the game doesn't prompt you to do this, but what you're supposed to do is just go Vault Forge and then go somewhere else. Like it wasn't something that like felt like it came supernaturally to me, but at the same time like it feels like the game is structured in a way that kind of encourages you to explore at your own pace and like do a lot of things like out of order. Even if you get roadblocked at a certain point, you can just come back to it later. Like it's really interesting thinking about it in that capacity, because like Prime 2 and Prime 3 were not this open. Like that's very important, because like Prime 3 had like the planet system where like you're going from world to world and like engaging with it, and you always started at the same place, and eventually you would get checkpoints, but like eventually you would get kind of to the to the end of it. Like it felt very railroaded. Prime 2 gave you this like you went to a new area and then you would explore it, but you would never leave it. Like everything you needed was right there. Like until you got the thing you were looking for at the end, until you turn the power on. Like it was just you were just stuck there. Prime 4 feels like it was trying to do this thing where you would more naturally backtrack through old areas and naturally like return to old ones. Like I remember like getting to the desert and like going around for the first time and being surprised at like how inaccessible a lot of the areas actually are initially. Like you have to do certain things to progress, but like it's not obvious inherently what those things are. So what that means is the game just feels like it's not really holding your hand all that much. It's kind of shocking because like at this stage, like before a lot of these people have actually played it, the narrative is that this is the most casualized Metroid game ever. And I can tell you for a fact that isn't true. Okay, like I'm dying a lot more than I do in the older games. Like the combat's more sophisticated, the enemy encounters are more in depth. Like there's plenty of things that are a clear improvement over the original Metroid Primes. There's plenty of things here to enjoy, and like all of the weird like coping and seething you see from people just doesn't make any sense. Like people complaining about the NPCs, people complaining about like the loneliness and isolation. Actually, the loneliness and isolation thing is really interesting because there are other characters in the setting with you, but you're stuck on a deserted planet, like with no with on a you're stranded on a planet in the middle of nowhere. Like you have NPC characters in it, but the game really does feel like more lonely and isolated than I think most other Metroid Prime games, because like there aren't even that many enemies. Like truth be told, like a lot of it is based on like being is more exploration based. So like you don't always get into like those crazy intense combat encounters. Like in a lot of ways, I feel this is the most lonely and isolated Metroid game ever, which completely flies in the face of like the narrative in regards to like Metroid is about isolation. Like this is the best at that in a way, and that's something I've really come to understand when I was playing this. Is that like, I remember when Prime 3 came out, and a lot of people were seething about it. I remember when Prime 2 came out, and people were seething about that. Like, people were just seething about it not being exactly the same as the original Prime, with no real regard as to like what it actually did well and what it actually succeeded at doing. You can argue this game isn't the best Prime game, but like, oh wow, it's not as good as one of the best games ever made. Like, it's just it, that's just not going to work, honestly. Like, playing the game, like I am very very surprised with how much I'm enjoying it. It is one of the best of the year. It's definitely better than Donkey Kong Bonanza, definitely better than Kirby Air Riders. And I was someone like who said initially that like I thought Air Riders was way better than this. Actually, I actually have come around to that, to feel that like Metroid Prime 4 just has this like addicting quality to it, of just like this sense of discovery and exploring the desert and exploring everything in this game. Like it's just something that I feel like the game feels radically different than anything else that exists. And like that's one of the interesting things I saw people say, is that like this game was like heavily westernized, and it's the exact same thing as every other AAA like sci-fi property. No, I saw a lot of people saying this was Mass Effect Andromeda tier. Like, no. The simple fact of the matter is, this is a game that has successfully taken Metroid in a bold new direction, that has done a lot more with concepts that have been built up across a series of games. The Metroid Prime 2 Galactic Federation. You have like the Federation Force in this. You have like, this feeling of going on this like military option, like an operation, like in Metroid Prime 3. Like, all of these older Metroid games have kind of been building up to this like next major step. And I find it very interesting, looking at this and what this game is doing. Like, I think once Nintendo really, really encapsulates what they're trying to do with like a sequel, we're gonna see something phenomenal. Okay. Like, there's so much about this game that's already like pretty cutting edge and just gorgeous. But I think this is a really great revival of the Metroid Prime series. I think we are going to see quite a few new Metroid Prime games in the next several years. And yeah, it all began here, like beyond what we have been expecting from the Metroid franchise.